A few days ago, I picked up this camera right here, the Canon EOS RP. And after a few days of using it and some testing, I've put together a solid little list of my first impressions and some of the things that I like about this camera and some of the things that I don't like about this camera. And so I'm going to go over that right now. So before I get into my first impressions, feel free to go down and like this video and subscribe to my channel. All your support really helps me out. Also, I have an Amazon affiliate link down in the description, so if you decide to purchase this camera through that link, I'll get a little bit of a commission and it's no extra cost to you, so that really helps me out as well. Alright, so anyways, let's get into some of my first impressions of the Canon EOS RP. So the first thing I'm going to talk about has to do with photos, and I noticed this right away when I started using it. Taking vertical photos just felt so much easier and just more streamlined than with something like my A7 III. And it's mainly because of the screen, because it can flip out and it'll rotate in such a way that when I'm holding it vertically, the screen's just right there in a perfect position where I can just easily move the camera around and just take vertical photos. And it's something that I've never really even thought about doing. I've never really taken vertical photos like with my A7 III, just because it's so awkward with the screen because it only flips up and down. So obviously when you're holding it vertically, it's like side to side and it's just really not a good placement. You have to hold it like eye level and it's really just weird. I've really never taken vertical photos, but right when I started taking photos with the EOS RP, I just tried holding it up like that and just kind of flip the screen out to the bottom there, and it almost feels better than taking photos horizontally now. It's so streamlined and it's just so, I don't know how to explain it. It's just so nice taking vertical photos, which obviously is something that not everybody's going to want to do. You know, if you post on Instagram, then yeah, it's going to be great. Not everyone that's going to have this camera is, a YouTuber or a content creator. So that's just something I noticed, that taking vertical photos is just so simple and so nice. And it's really just a lot more streamlined than my A7 III. And that has to do with all photos too, not just vertical photos. There's just something about the EOS RP that it just feels good. Like you love using it. And it's really not even anything to do with specs, because the specs aren't really that good compared to a lot of other cameras. It's just the usability of it. Something about using it is just so nice, and it's really something that you have to use it to understand. I really don't know how to explain it. I know a lot of YouTubers that you probably watch reviews say the same thing, that, obviously the specs aren't very good compared to other cameras, even in the same price point. But just the usability of it, and just something about using this camera, it's just so nice, and I really don't know how to explain it other than that. So let's get on to the next pro of this camera, the touch screen. So pretty much everyone has a cell phone now. Everyone's used to just touch screen on a cell phone, use the touch screen for everything. Most cell phones don't even have buttons anymore besides just a power button and volume buttons. That's something that most people are just used to at this point, and the Canon does a really good job with that. Because this camera, you can basically use it like a cell phone. You can use the touch screen to scroll through the menus, to change all the settings, to change your focus point, and it really just feels so easy and streamlined just using the touch screen to change all that. And something like my A7 III, the touchscreen doesn't do anything really. I have to use the buttons to scroll through the menus, to pretty much do everything. And the EOS RP just felt so much simpler, just to change my ISO just on the touchscreen just by swiping over real quick, or change my shutter speed without having to get into the buttons and dials and stuff like that. It just feels so much easier and so much faster and simpler for my workflow. Alright, and then next up on the pros, everything about it is just so simple and easy to use, and that ties in with the touchscreen as well. Just everything about this camera, it's simple, and that's a pro for me because I do videos like in the studio here, and I go out and take pictures just for fun. I'm not really a professional at anything with pictures or video, and something simple like that is just so easy to use. It still has good features, but it's not super difficult to use and super hard to find everything and get everything all situated. And so if you're a pro, obviously the simplicity of it isn't going to be as good because it doesn't have all of the pro functions that something like a 1DX Mark II or the new 1DX Mark III is going to have, or even like a C200 cinema camera. It's not going to have any pro photography or pro video functions and abilities. But for a beginner, which is what this camera's made for, that's what the price point is at, a beginner full frame camera. It's so simple and usable, and it's just perfect. I love it. And so that's basically the main pros of just the first few days of using this camera, kind of wrapped up into that list there. But it does have some cons that I've noticed as well, so I'm going to talk about those right now. First things first, the dial placement. So they're really nice, really usable, and simple, but they're just not in the perfect spot. And I really don't want to complain about this. I mean, it's just the dial placement. But the dial on top of the camera, I really have to like twist my finger back to rotate it. I'll actually show you right now. So it's this top dial right here. So when I'm holding it, you know, the shutter button is perfect. That's the perfect position. But this dial right here, I have to kind of twist my hand back to get it and to reach it. It's not terrible, it's just a little workaround, but something like my A7 III has a dial right up front here. It's the perfect position just to rotate it. But this one, you just have to kind of twist your hand up to get to it. It's not a big deal, but it's just one of the cons that I noticed about this right away. And even with this dial too, you kind of have to twist your thumb over. If these two dials were switched, it would be so perfect, because this one's just so easy to twist right there. And obviously you don't want to change your mode all the time like that, so I feel like if those were switched, it'd be perfect, because I can just reach right to it rather than having to kind of twist my thumb over to reach the other dial here. Alright, next up on the cons list, and this is if I'm not using the extension grip, it's just a little bit too short of a camera. And my pinky just hangs off underneath and kind of just catches on it, and it's just such a small amount too short that it's just kind of uncomfortable. But obviously with the extension grip that I have on it right now, that fixes everything and it makes it super comfortable and easy to hold. But again, if you don't have the extension grip, which is an $80 purchase if you buy it new, it's just not that nice to hold. It really isn't that nice. I really wish it was, you know, not even the length with this, but just a little bit longer without the extension grip, and it would just be perfect to hold. Alright, and so last up on the cons list is right in here, the SD card location. I just wish it was on the side here. You know, a lot of cameras have it on the side, you know, like my A7 III, even other Canon cameras have the SD cards on the side. I think they should have just done that. It'd be so much better, because when it's on a tripod, I always have to take it off the tripod, get the SD card out, plug it into my laptop, you know, anything like that. Or if there's a mount on the bottom here, like a quick release mount, it's just not gonna open, and you have to take it off and just take the extra time to get the camera off, just take the SD card out, and then, you know, once you get it back in, just connect it all back together, put it right back on. So I really wish it was on the side here, but obviously, you know, there's not too much I can complain about that. I mean, it's just the SD card location. It's not gonna make or break a purchase or anything. It's just something that I don't really like and that I noticed. And so that wraps up my list of cons with this camera. And I've only used it for a few days, so I'm sure I'm gonna think of more things for like my full review, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe. But so many YouTubers that hate on this camera are really thinking of it totally wrong, because this camera is $1,000 now. They lowered the price. It's $999 for a full frame, a new full frame camera. It was just released not even a year ago, I don't think. So it's still a new camera, full frame by Canon for $1,000. And I even picked up mine for $800 used with the extension grip, with 4 batteries, some other accessories. So I mean, it's a cheap camera for being a full frame camera. And you can't expect it to do everything that the EOS R or the 1DX Mark II or whatever other, you know, expensive Canon cameras do. You can't expect it to do that. It's a cheap budget camera. It's meant to be a beginner full frame camera. You can't expect it to shoot 4K 60 frames a second, and you can't expect it to shoot 10 frames a second photos or 20 frames a second or whatever. It's crippled because it's a cheap camera. If they gave it all the features that everybody says, oh, it needs to have all these, then it wouldn't be a cheap camera anymore. It'd be an expensive camera. It'd be, you know, $1,500, $1,600 like the EOS R. So if you want all the features that this camera doesn't have and that you wish it had, just buy the EOS R or buy the camera that's next up in line from this camera. You can't expect it to be a perfect camera for this price. It's just never gonna happen. And now, even at that price point, you can get something like the A6400. Yeah, it's gonna have better autofocus with 4K video. It has 1080p 120 frames a second. It shoots faster pictures, all that. And I understand at that point, I mean, this camera specs really doesn't hold up to other companies. Canon's always just been about the usability and just using the camera. And it just works. If you compare the spec sheet of this camera between any other camera at this price point from other companies, it's probably the worst one. But it's just not about that. It's about the usability. This camera is just so simple, so nice and easy, and just, it feels good to use. And that's what Canon goes for with this. So don't let the specs hold you back, unless you obviously need those pro functions that a more expensive camera is going to have. Don't let the specs turn you away from this. You know, maybe even just rent it or borrow it from someone and just try to use it for a little bit before you just turn this camera away, because it's just so easy and just so awesome to use. and that's what I love about it. So anyways, sorry about that little rant. I'm gonna wrap this video up now. That's my first impressions, the pros and cons I noticed right away from using this camera. Make sure you stay tuned for more videos about this camera. I'm gonna have more in-depth videos and video tests and comparisons, anything like that. So stay tuned, go down and subscribe and like this video, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.